Welcome to another episode of the Live Better podcast. We are proudly presented by Centric Federal Credit Union, and I'm your host and Centric's Marketing Senior Vice President, Kelly Green. Today, we are delving into a subject that just about everyone can relate to, inflation. In today's episode, we'll explore practical strategies and expert insights to safeguard your financial future amidst inflationary pressures. Whether you're worried about increasing grocery bills, housing costs, or the overall impact on your savings, we've got you covered. Tune in as we break down complex economic concepts into easy to understand advice, empowering you to make informed decisions and stay ahead of the inflation's curve. Don't let inflation derail your dreams. Let's tackle it together. So whether you've been a loyal listener or you're joining us for the first time, tune in as we break down complex economic concepts into easy to understand advice, empowering you to make informed decisions and stay ahead of inflation's curve. Well, I want to welcome all of our listeners to another episode of the Live Better podcast. Today, we are joined with my dear friend and our Chief Lending Officer, Laura Hawthorne. Before we get started, Laura, really, do you mind just telling our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you for having me on the podcast today. As you mentioned, I'm the Chief Consumer Lending Officer. I've been with Centric for 25 years. And primarily my role is to collaborate with our staff to provide solutions for our members.
Yeah, you're really good at finding solutions, aren't you?
I try really hard.
Yeah. Well, and in the state that we're in, and really in the topics of things that we're talking about today, overall inflation and what that looks like, sometimes a solution may seem like it's really out of reach for families. Their paycheck is being stretched more so than ever. But yet we still have the same needs and we're still spending like crazy.
Yeah, so people really have to work to identify areas that they may be able to cut back on, that there is not so much a particular need while we get through this season of life. And, once the economy changes back a little bit or pricing adjusts itself so that, people can continue to make purchasing a priority, then go back to spending money.
And the thing is, we're not immune to it. This is not new to us. It's not the first time that we've experienced this, a time of inflation. This is something that, you look back over history, it's an ebb and flow. And something I feel like, and if we didn't work in the financial industry, I don't think necessarily that I would really even know what that means and what causes it. Help us understand really what happens. How do we get to where we are with this level of inflation we're experiencing today?
Well, I'll say this. I think a really common misconception about inflation is just that prices increase.
Yeah.
And I think that if you've lived any type of life, you realize that prices are always going to increase.
Yeah.
Right? That's just part of its naturalness. But it's not just that price increase alone. It's also the demand of the same supply of goods that really causes inflation. So you have more people looking at the same item. And those coupled together is what causes the inflation, because the supply is not there to meet the demand,
right? Which
further increases the price of the cost.
Oh, yeah. And we see that a lot in here at the credit union. Our loan rates have increased a bit. And then you also think about, too, because we've got borrowers and savers. So you think about that, too, from a savings standpoint, the savings rates
have increased.
They have increased, right? And so normally when you see one goes up, one comes down. And where we're at right now is that, we've had some interest rates that have continued to go up from a lending standpoint, and then from dividends or savings, they haven't come down too much.
No, and I really don't know that they're going to come down in the short term. Very much at all. I mean, we have to work really hard to balance those rates so that we can continue to pay our savers, right, to have their money with us, and at the same time continue to make lending and loans affordable for members that really need them, especially those that are looking to purchase vehicles so that they can travel back and forth to work and, support their families and do all the things.
Something that we were talking about, you mentioned just the vehicles, having a vehicle to get you to and from, going to work. That's how we pay for the things that we have. But, how really and truly has inflation impacted the car industry?
Well, for a long time, specifically, coming out of the COVID era, the supply for all kinds of reasons. You know, chips was a big one at the time, but used cars were hard to find, which forced the prices of the used car industry to increase higher than we had ever experienced it before. And now you couple that with the rise in interest rates, because again, we're having to match those deposit rates and, you know, monitor what the Fed makes changes. It really makes searching for affordable vehicle with an affordable payment that much more of a challenge. And so we really have to work with members and car dealers to really match those two up.
I love what you said, that we have to really work with our members and help educate them on, one, what they can afford, and two, we have relationships, right, with different vendors, different, you know, could be anyone throughout in our state, but more importantly, too, is that we really want to look at a car buying program for our members.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so do you want to take us through that? Like, what if I were looking for a vehicle and understanding with inflation, I know I've got an idea of what I want to spend on a vehicle. How might I go about this as someone that might be a new buyer or maybe even with a trade-in? What do I do? Where would I start?
Well, I would say the very first thing you need to do is talk to your loan officer. Yeah. If you don't have a loan officer, we have plenty.
Yeah.
I can introduce you to some fabulous young people who would be more than happy to work with you. But you really want to understand what that's going to look like once you get into a vehicle. You want to talk about prices that you can afford, what payment is comfortable for you and your budget and your family's budget, and you want to talk about what that rate's going to be. Where does your credit stand? How can you make improvements to your credit to qualify for a better rate? Because that does matter as well.
Yes.
But once you're able to establish kind of that pre-approval and you know what you're really looking for, you can then begin to shop for a vehicle that fits into that type of criteria or those types of limits for you. And we have several avenues. I mean, we have a page on our website that lets you search through used car, new car inventory at dealerships that participate in the program that we offer, as well as we have some really great connections just from the loan officers themselves who've developed relationships with car dealers. And they're more than happy to direct you to someone that they trust and that they work with often, that knows that you are going to get a good deal, a fair deal. And I think that's really important.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. And I just want to recap for our listeners, too, is that if they are really searching for a vehicle, the first stop really should be your financial institution.
Absolutely.
And I think that when you're comfortable with your loan officer, they retrieve a credit report and understand if you have a relationship with them, they're going to know what your expenses are, maybe things that don't show up on the credit report, and help you as the buyer understand what you can afford.
Well, in almost all of our cases, all of our loan officers are certified financial counselors.
Yeah.
So they don't just have a background in lending and underwriting, but they also have, you know, some history and some education in budgeting as well.
Yeah.
And right now, I think, especially in this inflationary period, that's vitally important because it's not just about what debts you owe. You have a lot of other things that don't, you know, go into that debt ratio calculation that you have to be mindful of. Car insurance is at an all-time high. That's really important, and part of the car buying and shopping process is understanding what that's going to look like when you finally do purchase that vehicle that you're looking for. You know, gas right now seems to be reasonable, right? We've seen a little bit higher, but I mean, I can't complain too much about that. But then you have, you know, groceries you have to take into consideration. If you have children, you have child care needs, those types of things. So they can really work with you and understand, you know, if you need help in the budgeting area, where that payment is going to impact you and your family.
Oh, yeah. Because when you're adding on a new debt or increasing a payment, you know, when you're maybe necessarily paying off a vehicle and you're getting ready to purchase another one, there could be an increase in payment. And what does that look like for you, you know? I love that. So come visit with a loan officer, seek that pre-approval before you hit the lot. And one of the things that I love that we offer here is really talking with them, because once you get on the car dealer, you know, at the lot, you know, we don't want to speak negatively of them, but they too, you know, have an ability to finance, and they are going to want to run your credit, and that's multiple inquiries on a credit report that could really have negative impact.
It could. And then one thing I'd also too like to mention that we offer here at Centric is, while interest rates may be a little on the high side right now, once we come out and the interest rate market starts to kind of decrease a little bit, your loan here at Centric, and if you've worked to maybe improve your credit, if it was kind of lower at the time that you made your purchase, we're more than willing to rework with you and help reprice your loan, which will then also help decrease your payment and make it a little bit better for your budget.
When you mentioned repricing your loan, and this is something I think, especially when families are really trying to manage inflation, they're looking at ways to save money. And repricing your loan can do a couple of different things.
Absolutely.
You can change your payment frequency, which really, it lowers your payment from an initial, say if you're making a large one-time payment, splitting that up into multiple payments has significant benefits.
Oh, absolutely. One of the things I like about that is you're able to pay down the principal balance faster.
Yes.
Which means you're going to pay less interest over the life of the loan.
Yes. And that's the goal, is to get this car paid off so that you relieve yourself of that payment. A lot of times people don't realize that you can do the same thing. We hear a lot of times with, if you pay an extra mortgage a year, that, can actually reduce X number of, months from your mortgage. But when you think about this in anything that you're making a payment towards, and that's interest, it's earning, you're paying interest on those loans. When you can split up those payments and, really make those multiple payments, one, it's not such a huge hardship on that single large sum, that payment that you're making, but you're cutting down on the interest. And people don't realize that.
Oh, I mean, what other financial institution's how can I help you pay me less?
Right.
I just think it's a feel-good thing.
Yes.
For us, it brings us joy to help our members live better. And I think that teaching our members how to pay less in interest and earn more in dividends is at the top of what we do.
Absolutely. Because when you're able to put money down, you're financing less, which means overall it's going to cost you less. And when you're paying, you're making your regular payments, timely payments, that's going to increase your credit score. And that is going to save you in interest because your rates will be lower.
Future buying power is
critical.
Yeah, critical.
It really, really is. So something I want to ask about this too, and just kind of and wrapping up what we're talking about here, but overall budgeting and spending. So you mentioned this earlier, touched on it a little bit, but how should I really adjust my budget to account for rising prices? Do you have some tips maybe for managing expenses during periods of high inflation?
Well, I really think that evaluating all the things that go into your budget. What are areas of need and what are areas of maybe wants for now? Is that something that we can push off until there's a better time financially to be able to go back to participating in those types of things? And I think really, and again, working with our financial counselors can really help narrow down that budget and understand where your dollars are going and how you can rearrange those to put a little bit more back into your savings account during these critical times.
And one of the things that you mentioned when you're talking about putting money back into your savings accounts, something else that we actually offer here at Centric and I think are priced really well, and it's really advantageous for borrowers, are certificates.
Absolutely. Right now, if you have excess funds that's earning a minimum, I think some banks pay like less than, 0.2%.
Yeah.
It's very low. 20 basis points is what they call it.
Yes.
I think that right now, you can get a 12-month certificate for 5.15.
That's unheard of.
Or, maybe.
And it's secured. That's right. The thing, yeah.
And it's secured, and it's locked in for a specific amount of time. And 12 months right now is a really good term because you don't know in 12 months where we're going to be as far as what rates are offered. Yeah. So if you can lock it in at a 5% rate, why not? Let us pay you.
And there's no risk to that. We are insured by the NCUA up to $250,000. There's opportunities here that abound. And if you have a question, you've got excess funds of $250,000. Well, let's talk about that. What are some ways in which we can ensure that you will be insured? And so I just think that there's opportunities for everyone, whether you're, just starting your savings account, with $10, we can find ways to help you really maximize that.
Absolutely.
So I think the sky's the limit when you bank with Centric.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Laura, thank you so much for coming in and chatting with us today. I really appreciate your insight. You're an expert and been here for how many years?
25.
25. And you started working here when you were what, just 5 years old?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, listeners, I just want you to know how grateful we are for you. And it's a real privilege for me to sit down with our expert of 25 years here. She's been my long-term friend for over a decade. And I'm just so grateful for your insight, and I just appreciate your dedication. So, Laura, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you too.
Yeah. That brings us to the end of the episode of the Live Better podcast. And we hope you found today's conversation about inflation to be insightful in the world of personal finance. Knowledge is your greatest asset, and Centric remains your steadfast partner in that journey. If this episode resonated with you, we kindly ask you to show your support. Please hit the subscribe button, share this episode with your friends and family, and take a moment to leave us a review. Your input is invaluable in shaping the content that addresses your financial interests and needs. And of course, let's stay connected on social media. You can find us on Facebook at Centric FCU and on all other platforms under MyCentric. Stay in the loop regarding the latest financial insights and resources tailored to your unique financial aspirations. Until our next episode, always remember that Centric is right by your side as you navigate your financial journey. Thank you for tuning in to the Live Better podcast.